The second thing that you had going off of my list here was progressive values for women lead to less fulfilling lives for progressive women on average. That was the other one that you took contention with. Am I right there?
Or I would just like, I guess I'd like to hear you elaborate more on it. I've heard conservatives say that women fulfilling traditional roles tend to be happier. Is that kind of the crux of your argument?
Well, it depends on what you mean by a traditional role. So I think people get these confused a bit. I think that a lot of times progressive women are thinking like 1930s or 40s utopian nuclear family dynamic household leave it to beaver style. But that's not actually correct. When we're talking about tradition, we're just basically doing everything within the frame of the religious. So when we're talking about progressive values, they're all based on secularism. So they have nothing to base anything on except their own subjective preferences. And so they end up in this kind of quagmire of contention. But if you want to just go off of empirics, the mental illness for women is off the charts in comparison to men. It's in fact, even seeking professionals for women is off the charts in comparison to men. So is the rates that they attempt in adolescent suicide in comparatively to men. As the society, in other words, has become more egalitarian across the board, women seem to be suffering more, not less. In fact, there's a paper here which I can link you, and this paper cites it pretty good. It's called an evolutionary. I'm sorry. It's a the paradox of the leadership gaps and the paradox of the gaps when it comes to mental health in women. It asks the question, how come gains in women's rights haven't made women any happier? How come that hasn't actually done anything to produce these happy women that feminism promised us when feminism first began through the suffragettes? Like, what's the what's the aim here? What is the aim of feminism if not a happier, better society for women? Why are they all so fucking miserable the more egalitarian they get?
Um, I guess it depends whether you value hedonism or not. I don't know if a lot of people consider happiness and pleasure as like the ultimate goal of life. Like, I think a woman could say, maybe I'm happier, like less happy in this situation, but I don't necessarily regret it. I think a lot of people do like pursuing something that gives them a sense of purpose. But I don't know if necessarily pursuing something that gives you purpose leads to more pleasure in your life.
Yeah, but what would be your explanation for women having more trouble with mental health and reporting in almost every single individual aspect of their life that they're more miserable than when the polls that came before polled them in years past, where they're saying that they were much happier? And society had a much larger gap between men and women with what women were allowed to do, including things like bank accounts, things like this. I mean, we've definitely come a long way with feminism, especially in the last 40 years, but the miserable index for women is at an all-time high. I can't fathom how that could be possible as we close this gap if feminism is accomplishing its goal, why women are more miserable under it.
I don't know if this is necessarily the answer, but I would say that if you asked me 10 years ago when I'm like 13 years old, if I have anxiety, I would say no, because I don't really have necessarily the self understanding of what that means. Versus if you ask me now, I'd say yes. I don't think that necessarily means that I have more anxiety or that my life is worse than it was 10 years ago. I would say by every metric, my life is significantly better and that I'm significantly more fulfilled. So I think likewise, if women are kind of relegated to the household into traditional roles and they're kind of isolated and they can't really A/B test what life is like outside of it, then I think it's easier to dismiss negative feelings. Like, I think you need to have
So wait, hang on. I
positive
just want to
feelings to
make sure I
feel
got
negative
this
and vice
right.
versa.
I want to make sure I got this right. I want you to understand that the argument you just made was you said it's because those dumb housewives haven't experienced anything outside of being dumb housewives. So basically, it's blissful in their ignorance. That's what you're saying.
I don't know if I would say dumb. I would say sometimes, hmm. For instance, I think they would. I saw a statistic that says in some countries, like in less developed countries, people there also report more happiness. But I don't think the average Western person would say that they have a better life necessarily. Like, I think we could look at them and say, okay, there are ways in which they have in some ways a lower quality of life, right? So that's why I don't know if just the self-reporting on happiness is a good enough indication.
Well, no, that wouldn't be, but have the information right here. More than a quarter of American women, 26%, take drugs, which include antidepressants. 26%. And more than a quarter of all women take antidepressants.
What is it, Andrew? What is it? What is it for
26, men? What's that?
What is that number for men? Just so we have a comparison.
Varies between 12 to 15%.
Okay, got it.
So it's much lower. Okay, much lower. Same thing with antipsychotics. Okay, women aren't doing so hot, and all this egalitarianism that you've been pushing for, that has been going full throttle. You've been getting everything that you feminists have wanted, and when it's delivered unto you, you seem to go batshit fucking crazy. Isn't that weird? Isn't that odd to you?
I think the number of people on antidepressants has gone up in general, even for men, right?
Slightly, yes. But the deviation between men and women.
What would you attribute that uptick in male usage of antidepressants to?
I would say it's due to male oppression. The fact that men have been systematically oppressed inside of the United States under these horrific egalitarian laws, where we don't have egalitarianism at all, but rather we get raped in divorce courts. The laws are fundamentally unfair, and for the same crime that a woman is charged with, men are unfairly punished. The suicide rates of men are sky high in comparison to women. They get the job done. It's not that women don't attempt it, but it's mostly a cry out for help because they take pills, and then they call somebody and say, I took some pills, come save me. They put that up to a suicide attack, whereas men just get the job done, right? They just take a gun, and that's the way that they end up handling that. So all of these things, I would say that men are unfairly oppressed in society, and that's led to a slight uptick. And there seems to be enough correlates there for me to make such a bold claim. But I would like to still know, because we seem to just be begging the question, why in the world do you think that women who have more egalitarianism now than ever before, have more of these gaps closed than ever before, are more fucking miserable than ever before?
Wait, I first have a question on something you said. So if men kind of establish the framework of rights and happiness, why is it that men are the ones disproportionately facing oppression in society?
Well, remember what I said earlier, that men also oppress men, that men are the mechanism for that as well. I don't blame women for this. That's not the crux of my argument. I still think that men are the responsible party when it comes to the oppression in general of other men.
But why in this are they disproportionately affecting men more than women? If men are the ones who are, like you said,
it's not disproportionately affecting women more than it is men. It's just that in this particular case, when you're talking about the uptick, the slight uptick in things like suicidality and things like this, it's because the laws, which are on the books, tend to favor women, because women are a great consumer arm for corporate America. They're in charge of most of the money. Literally, they're in charge of almost all consumer spending. So laws are kind of tailored to kiss their ass. Corporations and lobbyists have gone out of their way under feminism to make sure that women's asses are kissed, and men seem to suffer greatly because of that.
Okay, so men create a framework that oppresses men so that they can make more money off female consumer spending?
Is that what I said? Is that honestly what you think I said? I need to know. Is that honestly what you think I just said?
I'm asking.
Yeah, I know you're asking, but you're asking a question that's not in relationship to anything I just said. So the question doesn't even make sense. So what just happened would be like if I walk over to a guy and I say, what color do you want me to paint your fence? And he looks at me and he says, margarine hat. Be like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? You might be asking me a question, but it's not in relationship to anything I just said. So do you want to ask me a question in relationship to something I actually said?
Sure. Can you summarize what your point was then?
Yes. My point is that, again, as countries have become more and more egalitarian under feminism, and this is feminist women and feminist men who are coming together under the same banner of I Heart Women's Rights, it's become more egalitarian. Why is it that the index for all of these mental illnesses and problems for women are through the roof, when feminism made the promise that these things should necessarily decrease?
feminism made the promise that mental illness for women would go down.
That all
I thought
aspects of
feminism was
women,
about
that the
sharing equal
quality,
opportunity. I don't know if feminism
that
is
the
promising that
quality
you're going to
of
be
women's
happier.
lives would greatly increase. It has not seemingly done that, unless you think that a woman's quality of life is not impacted by mental illness, which I would say it is, especially if 25% are on an antipsychotic, antidepressant, or some variation thereof.
I don't know if that's necessarily feminism's fault. Like you just said, we're in a framework in which sometimes laws are created to that like disaffect people mentally, like you just pointed to the divorce courts. I guess I'm just trying to wonder, why are you attributing the uptick in women's mental illness to feminism singularly? Like, how come you don't think it's just an effect of just, I don't know, other consequences of modern
Because women are the ones who have pushed, and feminists, male feminists as well, have pushed for egalitarianism. And across the board, in nations we see that become more egalitarian, we see this huge gap increase between men and women when it comes to women, A, wanting to do things that are more in line with their gender, which is a bizarre side effect feminists never want to talk about, but also that their state of mental happiness and mental health seems to rapidly deteriorate, which is fucking bizarre. These are, we can link this because we can look at other countries that have way more egalitarianism than even the United States, and we see similar numbers.
Yeah, I guess I should probably read more about those studies, and then we can reconvene at a later time. I don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all that's all I really had, to be honest. I don't know where we go from there.
Let me actually, do you mind if I ask you a few questions, Andrew, and then we can move the call forward? So as you guys were talking, I was just taking some notes. There's a few things I wanted to ask you. So I was researching the whole, like men's happiness, women's happiness.
What is that fucking clicking, dude?
I don't know. It's not on my end. Are you doing something?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm like fidgeting.
Okay. So I was researching, and so it seems that the cases that men's and women's happiness have been going down, but men's happiness has been going down more. So you do have a point there. But however, what's really interesting is that in the last 10 years, actually the happiness of both men and women has gone up, right? So it was kind of going down, 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 and then started going up. So I guess my question would be for you, if, we are more egalitarian now than we were 10 years ago, then why has women's happiness actually gone up?
From what? From what to what? And from which years to which years?
It's started going up in like 2010 or something like that. That's when it started
well, link it over to me because I don't have the data in front of me to look at.
Okay. Do you want me to just pull it up on the screen?
Yeah. Well, link it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, just put it in the private chat and then I'll take a look at it.
Okay. There's multiple charts you have to look at. I'll send you both of them.
By the way, did it decrease again? Did it go like this, in other words?
So yeah, so kind of like it went like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it went like this, basically.
Right.
But
you're probably going to come into another downward slope because that's how things like this generally work. So you'll see it go like this always on almost every single graph with a happiness index or any index. It goes like this, Alex. It'll start going up, then it'll decline. It'll go slightly up, then it'll decline, then it'll go slightly up, then it'll decline. So the reasons, there could be any number of reasons for this, including just which poll you're looking at which time.
It seems like there is, well, this only goes up to 2016, so I don't know what happened after 2016, but it seems like there's no decline that I'm seeing on these charts. Is there like a specific chart that you're referencing that we can take a look at?
Yeah, I do have some data handy if you want to take a look at it, especially on the gender gap in mental health. So
just more about like overall happiness based by gender.
Yeah, but my point isn't even based around the overarching happiness or overall happiness, but whether or not women have gotten more miserable as they become more equal or more egalitarian with men. And the appearance is yes, and that men themselves seem to do a lot better. They seem to be doing, even in the worst of circumstances, better than women who now have better circumstances than they've ever had. That's the point. Regardless of what the external chart would, even if it showed the happiness index going slightly up or slightly increasing, I don't even think that would contend with the point, really, Alex.
Well, if around 2010 women's happiness started progressively going up, wouldn't that kind of mute the whole argument?
No, well, no, it still wouldn't, unless you can point to a bunch of feminist shit that got passed between 2010 and 2022 that led to massive egalitarianism. I doubt it.
Oh,
No,
I don't think feminism makes women happy. That's
Yeah.
not the point I'm arguing.
I
I'm just
would
saying
expect in
this
almost
is a
any
concept.
chart, in almost any chart that you would look at for a happiness index or drug taking index or anything else, there would always be a point of decline where it hits bottom and then begins to gradually go up, begin to start to stabilize, and then maybe start another long drop. So it's hard to say exactly why that
Do you
would
think
be.
there's a wait, Fire, you gotta stop typing. It's super loud and like the whole chat is going crazy. Do you think though it's possible that maybe it's a non sequitur, meaning there's other things that have caused women's happiness and men's happiness too, but to a lesser extent go down between like 1950 and 2000? Do you think there could be anything else that could have done that?
There's tons of factors. Nothing's ever one-sided or has one faucet to it. It's probably a multifaceted issue, of course. There could be tons of other factors that come into play, but that still just kind of begs the question for this factor, which we do see a high correlation with in almost every nation that has feminism and egalitarianism in the first world, that as they become more egalitarian, this bizarre split begins to happen where not only do women start doing more traditionally womanly things when it comes to their jobs, which is bizarre, you would think that they wouldn't, but suddenly they don't want to become trash collectors. Suddenly they don't want to become dump truck drivers. Suddenly they don't want to become electricians. They don't want to become any of those things they fought so hard to become. It's so weird, but they actually move towards the opposition when they have full egalitarianism, interestingly enough.
Yeah, like intuitively, when you first made the argument, I was actually like agreeing with you because intuitively it makes sense. But then when I saw like the data change around 2010, where it started going up, that does kind of make me question how important is.
I actually can't see this chart because it just gives me an image. So
yeah, it's an image.
Yeah, but it doesn't actually pull the image up in the URL.
Do you want me to just share the screen so you just see it real quick? Far, I just muted
yeah.
you
What's it called? What's it called?
What do you mean? What's it called?
What's the chart called?
It's called. I don't know. It's like a men's happiness comparison or something like that. Here, I'll just share the screen. You can take a look at it.
Okay. But I want to look at the source myself to see if there's information you might be not overlooking.
Yeah, we can do that.
Who the fuck drew that? Where did you get this? This looks like it was drawn by a 12-year-old.
No, this is from Vox.
Oh, Vox. Very progressive source, Vox.
I know, but you would think that, but that's kind of most of the sources I've seen is they're saying that basically something.
Well, show me another one. Show me another source.
Okay.
That I can actually pull up and so I can look at the data myself.
Okay. 1 second.
Because everything I'm seeing shows that single moms more likely to be in poverty. All the risk for fatherlessness kids goes up because of that. Basically, all of these things in egalitarian nations greatly increase.
So to be fair, this is the UK, but I think UK is also following the same trend.
Dude, come on, man.
So wait, what's so bad about this?
Give me a chart for the United States that's making your point for you so I can look at it. Don't just make it a chart that doesn't have any information because that doesn't help me. I can't actually look at anything.
I can pull up the original article.
Yeah, do that.
More worthwhile, but also suffer anxiety. The report reveals. So okay, so where do you want me to go?
Well, link the article. Start with that.
Okay. So this is the chart in question here. This chart shows how happiness ratings for both men and women, blue orange, have increased since the service in 2011. They both have leveled off and grown closer together in 2015, 16. So basically, it's saying that in the last decade, men and women have been doing better.
No, it's not saying in the last decade. It's saying through to 2015 and 2016. But where's the data after that? We're not. Last I checked, we're not in 2015, 2016.
Well, do you have? That's why I'm asking you. Do you have any data about like something more recent? Because I haven't been able to find it. So all we see is that it kind of started going up.
Well, like for instance, you can intuitively know that this can't be true because just during the lockdowns, you would see something more akin to a dip down, right? Just because of that one factor, you would have to see that in modernity. So, and we would have to compensate and account for that as well.
Sure.
So no, I don't have a chart off the top or like at my disposal any more than you did. I didn't know which topic we would actually go with, so I didn't have it prepped.
You don't have to get defensive, Andrew. I'm just bringing up a point. I'm not trying to debate you. I'm just making a point, maybe to get you to question your assumption.
Not being defensive.
Okay.
I'm responding to what you're saying.
Okay. The second question I had for you was more of a hypothetical. I'm just curious to hear what your answer on this is. If women collectively started taking mass amounts of steroids and became as strong as men, would you then change your position on having an egalitarian society or no?
If what now? Say that again.
Hypothetically speaking, if women collectively started taking massive amounts of steroids and became as strong as men, would you then change your position on the egalitarian society?
No, I think that there's also intuitive things that men are better at. They're naturally better at. And even then, I think that men would still have an advantage, even if the strength somehow in this hypothetical monolithically was equalized. I still think that men would have an advantage, though I would have to rethink the entirety of the position then of where rights came from, because the advantage would be significantly more limited. I would agree that that's true, but I still think we'd have advantages in other domains.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Anyway, so let's. I just had those two questions. Let's just get back to the initial debate. I don't want to start debating myself. So I'm sure you guys have plenty of other points of contention. What were some of the things that you mentioned? You gave me a list of 6 things in the beginning. We did 2 and 3. What was number 1? What was number 4? What was number 5?
Yeah, so the first one is that women's suffrage and the women's right to vote has been bad for democracy and bad for women in general.
Do you disagree with that one, Farah? Oh, sorry, I have you muted. Let me unmute you. There we go.
I wasn't typing, by the way. I think it's just my.
Yeah, that was well. As soon as I muted,
there's
you,
a finger tap. I think you got your finger next to your phone.
Yeah.
Tapping.
Yeah, as soon as I muted you, the clicking went
I
away.
was just making noise.
You're good now. Right now, there's no noise.
Yeah, there is.
Oh yeah, there's. Fuck.
I don't know what it is. I'm not typing.
It's okay. It's no big deal.
You're good. Yeah, let's just ignore that. So yeah, do you agree with what he said or no? I'm assuming you don't agree with that.
Is that women's? Say it again.
Women's suffrage and the women's right to vote has been bad for democracy and women.
I mean, I'd probably disagree. I guess if we have these specific topics, I guess if we were just talking about feminism in a broad way, it's harder to read and think about it. But I guess if we have specific topics in mind, like if you want to talk about women's happiness and feminism and then the basis of human rights, we can always reconvene and I can read more about it and then come to a more concrete opinion on these things, I guess, right now.
That sounds fair.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that. Alex, you can always bring on guests if you want to kill 40 minutes with Q&A or something.
Yeah, sure. I guess the second thing I would bring up, which I think you guys might be better as a discussion, is gender roles. So I'm assuming Andrew believes in very strong traditional gender roles. I'm assuming, Farah, you do not, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that would be incorrect. I think that the construction of gender is false and that there's only sex and sex roles, and that what you would consider to be gender is actually conflated with sex, and that gender in and of itself is nothing more than fashion. That's all it is. It's just a here and now fashion statement, essentially. I don't think that gender as you understand it and as I understand it, I think are completely different things. I think that when you think of gender, you're just thinking of behaviors that are feminine. And when I think of gender, I think of sex roles, and that the sex roles themselves are what contributes to the behavior, not choices necessarily.
Okay, sure. So just rephrasing from gender roles to sex roles. You believe that biological males, men, should act like men. You don't believe that they should be the caretakers, for example, or they should be you believe they should work, they should do masculine shit, and the woman should stay home with the kids. Right?
I believe that men should act in a way that is virtuous, under the confined paradox of deontological Christian ethics and virtue ethics. Yes. So under that you would say that masculinity in and of itself, which is part of the nature of a man, should most definitely be pushed, not restricted, not confined. But with that should come the virtues, things like temperance, self-control, all of those things that allow the bigger, stronger sex to control themselves from being a bunch of rabid, disgusting animals, essentially. So, yeah, I think that masculinity is extremely important to society, but that men need to have their behavior tempered a bit and their judgment tempered a bit with virtue.
Do you believe there's such a thing as toxic masculinity?
It depends on how you mean it. If you mean can some of these red pill idiots go too far with this shit? Yeah. I think that Andrew Tate can go way too far with the shit that he says. I think that I might draw the line at touring another nation for a 14-year-old bride or something I think that gets beyond toxic and into just insane, to be honest with you. But generally, I think you would be hard fought, or I would be hard pushed to say that any kind of real masculine trait is toxic in any way, shape, or form. I think almost every masculine trait's a good trait. And I think that women love us for having them. So
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So the one that I always reference in debates is one aspect of what I think I would consider toxic masculinity is the stigma for men to get mental health help, right? There's just a little bit of a stigma about it, right? It's much more socially acceptable for women to go to a therapist than it is for men. So that's what would be something that I would personally consider to be quote unquote toxic masculinity. So that's an example.
why is that toxic though? Why do you think that
Because
that's toxic? I think that
because I think
psychologists, psychology in general, is overwhelmingly saturated with women, and I don't think that men going to women for their issues is necessarily the best idea. And I think
it
that
doesn't have to be
most,
to women. You can go to male
yeah,
therapists.
but I think that a lot of psychology in and of itself is bullshit guesswork. I think it's just bullshit guesswork. I don't think it's particularly helpful. I don't think that antidepressants and the overprescription of them has been good for society at all. And I think it's much smarter that men don't generally go out to try to seek mental health professionals to help them out with their psychological profile. I think the reason they don't seek it out nearly as much is because they have what women never seem to be able to have, which is friends. They have actual friends, and they hang out with them for hours and hours at a time and have lifelong friendships with them and confide in them and things like this. And I think that their friends tend to help them out quite a bit. So
All right, we fundamentally disagree on that point. Do you think men have more friends than women?
I think that they have more real friends than women. I think that women can easily get a lot of associates, but that when you're talking about long-term friendships, I think men are generally better at being friends with each other than women are. And I think that women value male friendship as much as men do, and value women's friendship about as much as men do, which is not very much. That's just my take, though. I don't have any empirics for that. That's just my intuition, kind of as we're going off topic. I'm sure
Okay.
that I could dig that up, though, if you want me to come back for a debate.
No, it's cool.
I
It's cool.
almost guarantee that that's true.
I just want to explore your thinking. Fire, do you disagree with any of what he just said?
Well, I have a question for him. He was saying psychology is kind of oversaturated with women. I was going to say then, do you think psychology is a good tool for women, or are you against?
I think psychology is a bad tool for most people at most times, and that it has a history of being directed by people who are kid diddlers and psychopaths themselves. And that the modern transgender phenomenon and many of the modern phenomenons that we see as a social contagion in society come from an overt amount of psychoanalysis from people who are trying to basically MK Ultra your fucking mind. That's what I think. I think that psychology and the prescription of antidepressants wide and en masse has been terrifically bad for society. It's not good for us at all. We shouldn't be taking these fucking drugs. And we never should have been. We never should have started on this mass prescription campaign to just dope down the entire public. That's a terrible idea.
I guess that speaks specifically to like gender affirming therapy. Are you just against that type of like psychological treatment? Like, do you think there could be a healthy form of psychological treatment that addresses the social contagion of what you see as gender dysphoria, or do you think all of it is what's causing it? Psychology as a field.
I think that it's definitely helped with a mass push towards it, including we give so much credit to these organizations like the APA, the American Psychological Association, for instance, and they have things that are on the books that are clearly mental illnesses. And due to the lobbying campaigns of various groups, they will take those things off the book as a mental illness and basically capitulate to the mob, even though quite clearly it's a mental illness for a person to be screaming in their head that they have to get out of their body or dismember their body to become the opposite sex. That's fucking insane. But the move to classify this as other than mental illness is bizarre to me. And this happens due to lobbying from these groups with tons and tons of money. And they're able to leverage organizations like the APA. I have a video of the former president of the APA talking about conversion therapy, where he says it was never really tried before the homosexual lobby came in and began to massively leverage the APA to drop homosexuality as a mental illness. So I don't have a lot of faith, a lot of stock in psychological institutions. It's a soft science. It's never been a hard science. Nobody's ever classified it as a hard science. The empirical data can almost never be replicated. It's the top at the replication crisis under the sociology banner. So, yeah, I have a lot of problems with psychology and psychoanalysis. And I think that the overprescription of society is terrible for us. And I think that Alfred Kinsey, who started the trans movement in general, was a sick kid diddler. Yes.
I agree with all the things you said. My only critique would be I feel like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, meaning like whatever confirmation therapy, whatever the fuck it's called, is a small part of therapy. Like most people are not going to there for that. I think for some people, like including myself, I've been very public about the fact that when I was going through a hard time, I went to therapy, and it was like very, very good for me, right? Like it prevented me from becoming an alcoholic, prevented me from even potentially doing something worse, right? So I think it can be very good if you go to the right therapist, though. That's a key precondition.
Let me ask you a question. Did they put you on any antipsychotics?
No, I've never taken an antipsychotic.
Right. So that's the thing. When we're talking about this, remember that a response to therapy or things like this, a lot of this is the issuance around antipsychotic drugs, antidepressants.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, but these are all things that begin to move your state of mind into a suggestive state of mind, where you can then through heavy suggestion be led to do all sorts of different things. It's a mass dumbing down of the public from psychologists, honestly, from that entire field.
Yeah, but I think you have to separate antidepressants from antipsychotics, right? Antipsychotics, I fully agree with you, should not be prescribed to anyone who isn't like full on straight up psychotic, right? I do agree those are overprescribed. And I do agree with you that antidepressants are also overprescribed, just like, whatever, like just like Valium is, just like Ritalin is, just like all that shit is overprescribed. So I agree with you on that. But for certain people, SSRIs can actually be very, very beneficial. Like, for example, again, with me, when I was going through a hard time, I was having panic attacks, me getting on SSRI stopped that from happening, and it didn't dumb me down. My intelligence level stayed the same. It was just something that, like, when you have a brain imbalance, that could be useful in the right circumstance.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up really bad there. For some reason, I'm having a bad hiccup.
Where did you lose me?
I'm still losing you here kind of intermittently, and I'm not really sure why that's happening. Hang on, just give me a second. Maybe it'll correct itself.
Farah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is it looks like maybe it corrected itself. Yeah, go ahead, man.
So the point I was trying to make is I do agree with a lot of the stuff you're saying. I agree with you that antipsychotics should never be used unless the person's like straight up psychotic. I do agree with you that those are overused. I do agree with you they can lead to disastrous side effects like shootings and suicide. But I think that SSRIs, while they are overprescribed, and should not be prescribed as often they are, can be very beneficial to certain people at some point in their life. Like for me,
that's going to be true about everything, even bad things. There, you could say that it could be true that a person being an alcoholic could be better than the alternative of him not being an alcoholic in some limited cases. So I would concede that in some limited cases, this may be a helpful thing for some people. However, I'm going to maintain that you may have been able to have gotten the same exact help from spiritualism or from your religion, which is something that's absent in your life, that you may have gotten from this over-the-counter drug. And I think that as we've replaced religion in society with just give them drugs, we kind of see this trend, don't we, of overprescription, people on antipsychotics, antidepressants everywhere. It disproportionately, of course, affects women, especially since women generally seem to adopt the religion of their husband. And as we become more and more religious, you see that there's less and less women, again, who have any type of real staunch religious values. So this is, I think that this kind of goes part and parcel that we have outsourced any form of spiritual fulfillment to people psychoanalyzing us and giving us drugs, man. I'm not sure that that's the best idea.
I do agree they should be prescribed more seldomly, but I do think in the right, I don't think it's an equivalent to like alcohol. Like alcohol, maybe in very extreme cases, it could potentially somehow benefit you. I don't think SSRIs are like even close to that. I think they're 3 degrees different. I think SSRIs, again, for a person who has
it's not directly, look, it's not, nothing I'm saying as a comparison is directly analogous. It's why it's just a comparison of the extreme. I'm just looking at the extremes and saying, of course, there can be cases where drugs like this, I'm sure, can help people. But on average and by and large, I think it's been pretty much disastrous. And you seem to agree with that.
I think they're overprescribed. I do think they've also saved a bunch of people's lives who would have otherwise committed suicide.
Yeah, but they might have ended up greatly destroying other people's lives due to the overprescription. So it's like, sure. Yeah. You have to be very cautious when you make a statement like that, right? It's like maybe they have, but maybe they've also destroyed more lives than they've saved. Like, we don't know.
Well, like everything,
brand new phenomenon.
Well, like everything, moderation is the key. I mean, someone who's like recreationally drinking whiskey on the weekend, that's totally fine. If someone is drinking 12 glasses of whiskey and then getting behind the car, like they're both drinking alcohol, but they're not in the same category. Moderation is always the key. for the people. If that person, for example, is taking certain prescriptions, he should not be drinking. If that person is like really young, he should not be drinking because that will fuck up his
Yeah,
brain.
but Alex, I don't disagree. Like, I'm not going to disagree with any of those normative claims. I think they're all true. Of course, that's true. Like, moderation is necessary for the success of any human being anywhere in life, doing anything. And any activity you can do too much of, and it can be bad for you. Like even drinking water like you do excessively, even that can be bad for you. And
it's not water, Andrew. This is kava, for God's sake.
Okay, I'm just saying, right? Even that can be bad for a person. I don't even think we have a disagreement here, to be honest with you.
No, I
we would
just
be arguing. We'd be arguing kind of just some nuance at the fringes, and who cares really?